Hi, I'm Peter Reynolds, and welcome to Pros and Conversations, the podcast that explores what it takes to be successful, whether you're from the world of business, science, or the arts. On this episode, we're diving into the power of career coaching for entrepreneurs and small business owners. How can coaching help build a thriving business, align with your goals, and overcome self-doubt? And someone who I have no doubt makes this podcast thrive as my co-host is marketing consultant Damon Adachi. How you doing, sir?
Really good, Peter. Really good. I'm excited for today. Coaching is a really interesting topic for me. It's something I've always been interested in. I've dabbled in a little bit in our networking group and helping other members. So yeah, I'm really keen to hear more about it today.
Yeah, it's something that I know I've never done myself, but it's always been of an interest to me. And I know that my son in high school, they're starting to talk about it even in grade 10, having these discussions, about what you want to do after high school, what you want to do in university, what is aligning with your interests. So I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation.
Can't wait.
So to talk about this, I think we have a terrific guest. Zerina Dervini is a career and life coach who specializes in personal growth and self-discovery to help professionals navigate their careers with confidence. Zarina, welcome to Pros and Conversations.
Thank you for having me.
I did pronounce your last name correctly, did I not?
Yeah, it's Derveni, but that's totally fine.
My
He
apologies.
doesn't get my name right either, so don't worry about it. We've only been doing this for 3 years.
I swear next year I'm going to get it right. Okay, don't worry. I promise you. I promise you. So to start with, maybe you could just take us back, Zarina, and just talk a little bit about your background, what got you into coaching, and then we can sort of talk a little bit about the services you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey is kind of interesting because I started off, having this strong desire to be in corporate. And I think my educational background really, expressed that I was into business and just wanted to start a career where I would grow within a corporate organization. So after a decade of actually seeing this vicious cycle repeat itself, right, every 3-4 years, I would stop and think, okay, there has to be like a greater purpose to my, professional journey. And then when I would pause and think, I thought that the next step would really be to maybe, go to a different company, try a different role. So there was this self-discovery journey that I had to personally go through in my earlier years that got me to where I am now. And I think one of those pivotal, sorry, go back. But one of those moments where I realized that, maybe I could do something different with a greater purpose actually started during COVID. So as I started a new career in this company where I was really invested in wanting to stay and grow within the company, I also started learning a lot about coaching, and I would spend maybe an hour and a half a day listening to podcasts. So that was really a significant moment in my career journey where I thought, I'm really learning about, coaching and the transformational aspects of, mindset shifts, right? Learning to think differently, learning to operate differently was something that I felt so passionate about. But, the journey was a little bit longer for me. After 2 years of listening to probably, so many podcasts, I had the aha moment. And at this time, I had actually reached a really big milestone in my career as well. So, being in that moment, I was thinking, okay, do I want to take this journey where I invest in myself and become a life coach, right? Where I can teach my clients, to really live a life of more purpose when it comes to their careers or their professional lives, right? Rather than maybe chasing significance, which if you look at my cycle, I was really going after significance. So it took me about 6 months to really sit on the idea and analyze the risks, right? It was not an easy decision, but I think after 6 months, like any person who has to make difficult decisions, they ask themselves, is this worth it or not? And I use an approach where I like to ask myself, what would you regret more, right? Would you regret more taking a risk, right? Or would you regret more not taking that risk and investing in yourself? So I chose the path to leave the corporate world, leave that security behind, right? Which is not easy. So I don't want to say it was an easy journey, but it definitely felt like the right journey for me. And I started my own coaching boutique about 2 years ago, and I have not looked back.
I'm wondering, Zarina, you mentioned before about significance, that you were pursuing significance. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think, when you get into coaching, you really start to learn some tools that help you kind of go through this self-discovery process. So at that time, I did not know I was looking for significance. I thought I was just doing what everyone should do, and that's pursue growth. But really, significance is about status. It's about recognition, right? It's about seeking that external validation. When really now being at the spot that I'm in, it's contribution, right? It's creating value that I'm really after, right? And I think having the narrative of both and living in kind of both and leading my life with both values, I see the impact now where I'm more focused on, the contribution I'm providing in my business and in my clients rather than the significance of it.
Super interesting. It's a brave step you talk about in leaving that hamster wheel that they've got us in to move ahead and to achieve more in that significance. You have to be passionate about it, and that translates, I'm sure, into how you deliver coaching and connect with people. There's so much about self-discovery that you mentioned, which is that self-awareness and emotional intelligence. How do you connect with people at that level and earn their trust to give them such life-driving advice?
It's a really good question. I think, when you get into coaching, a lot of what you do is actually building that connection with your clients. So when I have my first initial call with potential clients, really it's a discovery call, and it's an opportunity for me to get to know them and for them to get to know me, right? I think there has to be this genuine connections where they feel comfortable to talk to me and feel comfortable sharing some of those vulnerable moments in their life, right? And for me, I have to make sure that what the client is looking for, whether it's specific goals or they have certain targets, is something that I can actually help them with. So there is this understanding on both sides that the client feels comfortable and connected with my values and my coaching style. And then B, on my end, I know and feel confident that I can help them reach their goal. So really it's kind of, a synergy between the two of us.
And that's the contribution part you talk about. It must be hugely rewarding for both you and the client when you have those amazing discoveries. That's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I love is the fact that you yourself were at a crossroads and you started to look at coaching, you started to look for answers yourself. And it not only helped you make the decision, you decided to actually, you needed to apply those techniques and those things you learned to help others. I think of like the person who goes to therapy and it is so life-changing for them, they become a therapist. So you can definitely hear the passion in your voice for sure. Zarina, can you talk a little bit about the difference? But I know you do life coaching and career coaching. Can you talk about the difference? Are they integrated? How does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of times, they are connected. So when I work on my professional coaching or I'm coaching entrepreneurs, there is the self-discovery part where we do some deeper work, right? And working on the why is a big part of coaching. So I think, when I'm helping a specific client with a goal, whether it's professional or personal, there are components and processes to the coaching journey that we do get personal, right? And on the professional side, I think, the results are always related towards either business or their professional careers. But really, there's a lot of work that we do on the personal side. So they are connected. I think the difference is if I had a client who wanted just to focus on their personal life, we stick to that. But even then, part of your personal life has to do with finances, has to do with your career. So they're interconnected, but it's where the main focus stays that's a little bit different.
Interesting. Um, this might be a little controversial, not intended to be, but do you find that women want women coaches and men want men coaches? Is there that sort of dynamic with that kind of connection that you need to form?
Yes, it's actually a good question because I even decided to really focus on women. And my whole career in the corporate world actually dealt with working with men. And I had a great experience with that. So for me to not only go into coaching, a completely different industry, but then to really focus on women as my main clientele has been an interesting journey. But I do find I can only speak from my experience. I do find that, the men that I have spoken to when we were talking about coaching, they're looking more for a accountability coach. So I can understand why they would want to work with a male coach and just stay focused on that. And then with the females, I find there is this understanding that deep work will be done, right? So we're going to tap into some of the emotional side of things while understanding the logical side. So there seems to be this just clear understanding, woman to woman, that we are going to talk about emotions and we're going to, understand maybe some of especially when it comes to limiting beliefs, right? We're going to understand that some of those conversations are going to go a little bit deeper. And that's why for me, I think just the way that I communicate as a coach and the value that I really want to add, it's more than just reaching that goal, right? It's long term. I want to make sure the clients I speak to leave our coaching session with this empowerment feeling to do more and change for the longer term, not just for the goal.
It's interesting because I was checking out your website and you talk a lot about aligning daily habits with long-term goals. And I think it was an interesting concept that I wanted, if maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So typically, when we're working towards a goal, right, we've got the main goal, which is at the top, and then we've got our actual or our reality state, which is usually at the bottom. So we see this big gap, right? And it's how do we get to that goal? And in my coaching approach, it's really important to create, small actionable steps, right? So when we create small actionable steps, we work towards getting to that goal in a much more gradual process, right? And I think being results driven is important to me, especially as an entrepreneur and as a coach. I want to make sure that my clients are seeing results, but I don't want that to be their main driver, right? I think establishing those daily habits should be those main driver. And ironically, I noticed, before we started creating these big goals with my clients, they would get all excited and want to work towards it. And they, became really results driven. And I had to pause and ask, do you know how progress works, right? It sounds kind of like a simple question, but really we subconsciously have this idea that progress is linear, right? So stepping back and setting some expectations here was important for me, for my clients, to make sure that they were focusing more on their daily habits rather than goals, and explaining that progress sometimes can mean, you have high highs or low lows, right? I typically see this with a few of my clients who are sprinters. They'll do a bunch of stuff at once and then they'll pause for a bit, right? And then when they're pausing, they're getting a little bit worried. They're thinking, oh, I'm not living to my potential. And I have to kind of step in and say, well, hold on. Let's look at your pattern of progress, right? It's not the linear way. You do a different way, and that's okay. And that's still progress. So, remain focused on your daily habits. And then I've got other clients who typically are the overthinkers, but they have a more delayed start to progress, right? And again, there is this sense of, I'm not doing enough, things are not moving. And it's like, well, hold on, we're working on the daily habits, we're getting there, right? So progress looks different for you. So I think the alignment is really important on, focusing and prioritizing the daily habits, because we will get to the goal and how we get there will be different. But really, those small actionable steps daily are much more impactful.
Is it possible to be an overthinking?
Tail chasing.
Well, I tend to be, it's interesting as you're talking, I'm starting to think about, because I definitely will power into something, and sort of lose momentum. And they talk about, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but I often treat it like a sprint. But that's, but I also tend to overthink. So we got a lot of sessions in us, Zerina. So
Don't go there.
There's a lot. I don't know if you want to unpack it, but there's a lot going on.
I found it really interesting how you're weaving in all the elements of the motivation by, changing perspective and the paradigm shift and the emotional intelligence and all of those things. It's got to be quite a task to figure out which string to pull at the right time to get people to see where they are and to stay on track and to see the track moving forward. That's really interesting. So I want to pull back to when you mentioned when you started out and found your passion in this, it was through podcasts. And it's a really powerful medium that's available. And there's so much content out there. And it's super convenient to put it on while you're driving and listen and pick up these tidbits of wisdom along the way to try and string them along together for yourself. There's got to be so much more benefit to dealing with a live person one-to-one and getting that customized interaction. But can you speak to the benefits of having an actual person that helps you versus listening to somebody else's program that is very generic?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, when it comes to hiring a coach, actually, sorry, before I even say that, I think a lot of people are familiar with therapy, right? And therapy seems to be much more common than maybe hiring a coach when something in our lives is not going right or we're feeling stuck or lost. And I do see the impact of therapy, and I think therapy has a lot to do with the past, right? So when we're talking about hiring a coach, I think where some of the benefits are lost is we're currently working with clients and dealing with the present, right? So you're hiring a support system to help you right now with the present and working towards goals that you have in mind for the future. So I think that itself, like having that support system, having that one-on-one interaction is extremely important when you're looking to either find clarity in your life or understand a different purpose in your life. So I think for me, one of the main benefits of hiring a coach is having someone not only hold you accountable, but having someone be there to support you, right, through your journey. As much as, we can rely on our partners, our friends, our family, we don't have the capacity to get that level of support as you do through a dedicated coach.
We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Pros and Conversations is brought to you by For the Record Productions, providing video production services to corporate and nonprofit clients for over 20 years. To learn more about how we can help your business, visit videosthatmatter.ca. And by the Business Alliance, a professional peer group that helps you grow your business through networking, collaboration, and sound advice. To learn more about how to become a member, visit jointhealliance.biz.
Yeah, and I imagine there are conversations that you don't want to necessarily have with your partner, and there are, some kind of inner things that are tough to work through on your own that you need to bounce off somebody more objective or neutral. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was going to say objective because it can be challenging. Obviously, if you're struggling, there may be some things that you don't want to necessarily share with your spouse, but also if they're incredibly supportive, they may have blinders on as to some things that you need to work through. So absolutely having that objective third party makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure, right? Sometimes to put on your partner, right? I think having the ability to go and ask for help and see a specialized coach can help you even learn how to self-heal, right? Can help you learn how to make more decisions that are based on your actual core values. So really, I think, having the expectations of mentors or partners or friends or family The expectation that they're there to support you is great. But when you got to do some real work and deep work, I think that's where really considering hiring a coach is so beneficial.
Okay, I have a question. What does a typical package look like in terms of how it operates?
hmm So typically, I offer two types of coaching package. One is a 3-month package, and the other is a 6-month package, depending on how many goals we're working towards. And once a client selects a specific package, then we start meeting weekly. And usually, it's an hour session, same time and day, just for consistency. And then we'll get into the hourly sessions on a consistent basis. But pretty much the session is broken down into 3 different parts. So the first one is a check-in. I think it's important, as I'm coaching and providing support for my content to remain as relevant as possible. So when the client is able to share, any challenges or milestones happening that week, we can focus a lot of the content on that while we're working towards building goals or strategies towards their goals. And then the second part, and this is where we spend majority of our conversations around, really is the strategy, right? So these are the actionable tools that we're working towards. It's a lot of mindset shift work here, a lot of empowerment work here, but we do spend majority of our conversations in the strategy piece. And then lastly, I always like to close off a session with clear understanding of next steps before our next session. So just kind of reviewing everything we've talked about and understanding what the next steps are for the clients is how we close it off.
Well, it seems it's a very holistic approach, it seems that you take. I was interested, we've talked a little bit about self-discovery and self-awareness sort of playing a key role in the decisions that we make for our business. I'm just wondering about what stage in the business for those people listening that, when do people typically come for coaching? Is that in sort of the early stages when they're just starting out and they're trying to decide on their direction? Or is it more in the later stages where maybe their values have changed, things have changed in their lives, yet they're still doing the same things in business and they need a sort of again, self-discovery to sort of understand where they should be going? What are your thoughts on that?
hmm So, I mean, for me right now, I do see a blend of both, right? So you've got the younger crowd who are much more self-aware and surprisingly, they're kind of raised in this environment where it's good to invest in yourself and hire a coach. Like that's all socially acceptable and seems to be what their peers are doing, right? And then I've got a bit of an older crowd where they've been doing exactly what you said, Peter, kind of the same thing over and over again. And now they're at a point where they're looking for support or they're feeling lost. They know they have to do something differently, but they don't know how. So when they reach out to me, right, they're kind of looking for direction here and some sort of clarity. And that's a different demographic where it's, understanding that they're not necessarily gonna step in my coaching program and know everything, maybe how the younger crowd will know because they've done a lot of the self work or they've, maybe watched podcasts like I have, right? So it really is a different demographic. And, the one common theme that I see, especially with my older generation crowd, is they talk about this wasted time, right? There is this kind of common theme that I get, and it's like, oh, I wish I knew this earlier, or I spent so much time doing this, and I thought this was the right way. I wish I had access to this a little bit earlier. So I think, taking those learnings and understanding that everyone kind of has their own journey is okay. Oftentimes I look at my own journey. I had to repeat my cycle 3 times before I got to where I wanted to go. So cycles are okay. It doesn't really impact, your progress to growth. However, picking up on those cycles, that's where I really place the importance with my clients and understanding that, it's never too late to start. I truly believe that, because once you really understand it, you operate completely differently. And I think that's where the impact is. But to really kind of answer your questions, I do get a little bit of both, and it's been an interesting dynamic getting a bit of both. And then, working with younger entrepreneurs has also been an interesting journey, because they're so intelligent, they have so much wisdom, but they lack experience, right? So there's a sense of grounding I'm teaching with them, where I don't have to really go through that with the older generation. They're much more equipped in that.
So I kind of want to dig into that a bit. Between the two styles, the older generation, the new generation, which ones are more receptive to hearing new perspectives and new discoveries? Because I would find that you're right. This new generation of entrepreneurs is more self-aware and has more tools, but they think they know everything already. So it's hard to mold them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You've met my son, obviously, Damon.
Yeah, it was your son I was talking about.
Absolutely.
It wasn't my son.
That's such a good question, because, when it comes to coaching, really what you're there to do is guide, right? You never want to push forward something because, you think it's the best outcome for the client. So where my magic happens in coaching and where I feel the most fulfilled is when the client themselves is going through the journey that I maybe saw the first or second session, right? But I'm allowing them that growth journey, because that's when we really learn. So I do think, though, the older generation is a little bit more open to trying newer things, as long as it's in small steps, right? Whereas the younger generation, you're right, Damon, there is a sense of, I know it, right? But then it's bringing them back to this new perspective of, well, look, you still have to practice this, right? I think it's great to know things in theory, but that's not how life works. And that's where me, coming in and sharing my experience, especially in the corporate world, because I've had, reached successes and I've had reached milestones where I can share that journey with them and say, well, hold on, this actually happens. And even starting my business, I thought like you, but here's the reality. So there's this notion of putting importance on their intelligence with theory, but really theory is nothing without engagement, without practice. So establishing that understanding that until you experience something, you can have this sense of theory that it could work, but experience, that's where the value is. So it is kind of bringing them back to being a bit more humble and understanding humility, right? I think that's important. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic between the two. But I do find that the older generation is much more open to listening to my advice at first and will take it, where the younger generation will have this mindset that they're clear on, and then come back and wanting to learn through their failed experience.
So when you have greater than a 1 week period between sessions, do you see a tendency for your clients to fall back and to slip back into their natural state, we'll say, or backslide a bit? Or, I mean, I'm very impressed that it's weekly. That would be fantastic. But I could see if you went on vacation for a couple of weeks and were left to your own devices for a while or something, you might kind of creep back into your old mindsets.
Yeah, I think, I don't necessarily see the impact week to week. I do see the impact, though, when they are going through challenges. So it depends, when that happens. So automatically, when we go through a challenge, we go back to operating the way we did before, right? That's our comfort level. So if you're dealing with a current challenge, you're going to, whether it is that you deflect, or you freeze, or you're one of those people that gets really anxious and you want to avoid things, you go back to your natural comfort level when you're dealing with challenges. So that's where it's a great opportunity for me to have that conversation with my clients. And although we have weekly sessions, we do communicate on a weekly basis. And when they are on a daily basis, if they need support. But when they are going through a current challenge, that's where I encourage them to really reach out. And that's where we do some of the deep work, where it's like, listen, I know your first instinct is to, react a specific way, but let's take a step back, right? let's look at your patterns. How many times have you reacted like that in the past and it hasn't been in your favor, right? So it's really talking about how some of the past behaviors have not worked in their favor. Let's handle this challenge a little bit differently. And that's where I really start to see the impact of my coaching, right? Whether they take it or not, because I understand it. I'm a human being too, right? And as much as I know about this, I still sometimes go back to my old comfort level, right? I have the awareness to at least understand it. Where in our relationship with, when we're first starting off with coaching and in our relationship, we're still building that trust. So the moment there is that opportunity for me to step in and help them handle that challenge in a different way, that's when I start seeing the shift.
I'm interested to talk a little bit about how the coaching sort of can help the larger picture in terms of someone's business. So we're working on them personally. We're looking at self-discovery, self-reflection. But can you talk about how it potentially could build stronger relationships with employees within their company?
hmm hmm So when we talk about coaching and when we talk with entrepreneurs, the main focus really is on the value, right? I think as an entrepreneur for your business, I want to know what is the value that you're creating and adding. So once we start talking about value, we're really talking about this self-discovery journey that's much larger, than having some of these short-term goals, whether it be, finances or growth. So having that deep understanding of value helps me also understand the impact that the entrepreneur wants to make, whether it's with herself or in the business. And then once we align on what that value really is, and kind of going back to what I talked about with contribution, then we really start to look at some emotional intelligent practices that can help them get to that value at a larger scale, right? And
Mhm.
I think having that value system as a foundation in the workplace is important amongst their team and with their clients. So we do a lot of work around emotional intelligence and learning how to understand your emotions first and the emotions of others. We also do a lot of work about communicating effectively, right? I think learning how to communicate effectively with clarity saves you so much time. I mean, I have some stats from ICF, but really learning how to effectively communicate as a leader is an important tool. And that's something we work on, especially when it comes to managing relationships and even actively listening, right? So, how many times do you listen to respond? I do, right? We get into that habit of listening to respond, but really taking a step back and learning how to actively listening, getting out of that old habit of listening to respond, but really, truly listening, whether it's with your employees or your clients, can really help deepen that connection and relationship. So, do a lot of emotional intelligence strategy work and mindset shift, as well as, again, bringing back that main purpose, that value that the entrepreneur is wanting to add in alignment with the goal, is something that I also work on that helps
Mhm.
them deepen
Mhm.
the relationship.
So those pieces of leadership and communication and, uh, you know, culture is what you're talking about. You're really actually building corporate culture that allows the team to feel like a community rather than subordinates or, culture doesn't start at the bottom, it starts at the top. So I can see that those pieces, when you integrate them into an organization, can lead to significantly better outcomes on the business side, in the finances, when people are working properly together and feeling like they have purpose and they're contributing and it all comes together. So these are
Yeah.
fantastic benefits from that type of business coaching as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think it helps too, having been on the other side, right? Having been an employee for so long. I think, there's great practices that I implement in my coaching that I've seen work effectively, where work performance was at its highest. Why? Our leader was doing something differently, right? So it's bringing those in at the same time. Being an employer, I understand the challenges too. So it's an interesting perspective.
It's kind of like when you're a parent, you go, I'm never going to do that to my kids. If I ran this company, I'd do it so much differently.
I think we have all experienced that. I can definitely hear my father's voice every so often when I'm talking to my son, and I have to catch myself. So
You need a coach. Coach.
I think I do. No, I trust me. I think I need a team. It's not just one person, Damon. I need a team. As we're sort of wrapping up our conversation, Zarina, I wanted to ask if we could speak maybe to our listeners out there, people who are on the fence and they're not sure whether they need a coach. They may be, quite happy with things are going, but not recognize some of the challenges that they're facing that could be helped by a coach. Could you maybe speak to those people who are on the fence?
Yeah. So I think if you're considering going to a coach, usually it's two scenarios, right? I think the first one is you're just feeling lost, you're feeling confused, you need a sense of direction. Or the scenario that you're speaking to, Peter, which is more so, you could use some areas of improvement in your life, but you're kind of on the fence because, you don't know much about it, or no one around you is really talking about speaking to a coach and it being effective. I personally say, if you feel that you need this shift or this change, try it out, right? I think we're so quick to invest in other things in our lives, where when it comes to our actual personal development, which is part of mental health, why not consider it? And coaching, again, it's one of those services where we really focus on your present. So it's a little bit different, right, than therapy, as I mentioned earlier, or any other sort of support, because you're taking into consideration your exact reality right now and working towards some goals or even, desires that you think you have. So hiring a coach, in my perspective, will make a shift in your life. Whether you want to make a bigger impact, in your personal or professional life, that's completely up to you. But going through a self-discovery journey can only be beneficial to you and can help, raise awareness that you never knew you had.
Well said.
Any final thoughts, Damon?
I was just, as you were talking about that, I was picturing like you go to the gym. That's one of the things a lot of people are doing for self-improvement. You wouldn't want to see your doctor there, right? That's the therapist version of it. But a personal trainer, somebody who can coach you and guide you and tell you like, here's how you can do this 2% better and get 10% better results. So in those terms, people are very comfortable with the idea of somebody who has some level of expertise in a field and can give them guidance and can keep them on a path. And why not do that in your life and in your business as well as in the gym and other places like that?
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes I actually see parents getting coaches for their kids, right? And I think that's beautiful. But how often are parents getting coaches for themselves, right? And they're not, they're considering that investment when it comes to themselves, like, oh, do I need it? I'm okay. But then when it comes to their kids, it's like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. So really it's having that mentality of the desire of wanting to invest in yourself, right? You are your greatest caregiver, right? So I think having that initial investment can only improve where you are in your life.
Oh, sign me up. I could be better. I'm sure I could be better.
A little bit better, Damon.
Well, I didn't say a lot.
Okay, we'll talk after. Zarina, where can people find you?
You can contact me on my website. It's ZerinaLifeCoach.com, or on Instagram. I'm pretty active there, and my handle is Zerina Life Coach.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. We've covered so much. It's been a really insightful conversation. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
And Damon, as always, great to have your take on things.
I do what I can.
And as always, finally, a big thank you to our audience. Your support means the world to us. And don't forget, you can catch Pros and Conversations wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch a video version on YouTube and see our beautiful faces. So be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps keep the conversation going. So for Zarina and Damon, I'm Peter Reynolds. You've been listening to Pros and Conversations, and we'll see you next time.